She slammed the chart flat on the counter and said the man who wrote it had never seen a crush injury in his life, and the whole night shift went quiet. 11 hours later, a man with a torn side would sit on her table and refuse a doctor, refuse anesthetic, refuse everything except her hands. And at 6:14 the next morning, she would pull back her curtain and find 200 men standing shoulder to shoulder in the street below her window, silent, unarmed, waiting for her. Subscribe now and stay with this story to the very end, because nothing here happens the way you expect. And drop the name of the city you are watching from in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled. The chart was still lying where she had dropped it when Dr. Amos Rayner finally looked up from his screen. Nora Beaumont did not apologize. She had spent 11 years learning exactly how much apology a woman in scrubs was expected to produce per hour, and she had decided somewhere around year 6 that she was running a deficit on purpose. She tapped the page twice with 2 fingers hard enough that the sound carried down the hall. "Whoever wrote this has never seen a crush injury," she said. "That is not a fall. That is a load that came down on him." Rayner blinked at her with the particular patience of a man who had learned that arguing with Nora cost more time than agreeing with her. He glanced at the chart. He glanced at the clock. It was 11:40 at night at St. Ansgar Mercy, and the waiting room was already 40 deep. The air conditioning was losing to August, and somewhere behind curtain 2, a woman was screaming at her brother in 2 languages about who had the car keys. Nora. His fingers are pointing the wrong way. All 4 of them, same direction, same angle. You do not get that from a staircase. You get that from something heavy that rolled. Nora, the man said he fell. The man said he fell because somebody drove him here and told him what to say, and that somebody is sitting in the lot right now in a truck with the engine running. Rayner rubbed his eyes. He was not a bad doctor. That was the part that always got her. He was not a bad man either. He was just a man who had learned to keep his head down in a building where the largest single employer in the parish also happened to be the largest single donor to the hospital foundation, and who had a daughter starting at Loyola in the fall. "Write what you saw," he said finally, "not what you think." "I always write what I saw." "I know you do." He handed the chart back to her without meeting her eyes. "That is what worries me." She took it. She wrote 3 lines in the mechanism of injury field, precise and unarguable, describing angle and direction, and the pattern of the bruising along the back of the hand. And she did not once use the word crush, because she did not have to. Anyone who knew how to read it would read it. That was the whole point. That had always been the whole point. Then she went back to work because there were 40 people in the waiting room, and one of her was not enough. By 1 in the morning, she had reduced a dislocated shoulder, talked a 15-year-old out of leaving against advice, and held the hand of a woman whose husband had been dead for 6 minutes and who had not been told yet. By 1:30, she had eaten half a granola bar standing up at the medication cart. By 1:50, she had washed her hands so many times that the skin between her fingers had cracked and started to sting. At 2:11, Bay 9 went dark on the board. That was the first thing she noticed. Not the men, not the suits, the board. Every bay at St. Ansgar Mercy showed a name, a triage level, a physician assignment, a timestamp. Bay 9 showed nothing at all. It sat there in the middle of the screen like a missing tooth. She looked up from the board and saw the 2 men standing outside the curtain. They were not large in the way that men in stories are always large. They were large in a way that was worse, which was ordinary. 2 men in dark suits that fit them, standing with their hands folded in front of them, not blocking the hallway, not making a scene, not doing anything a person could point to and object to. They had simply taken up position on either side of curtain 9 the way furniture takes up a room. One of them met her eyes and did not look away, and did not look hostile either. He just looked at her the way a man looks at a door he has been told to watch. Nora walked over with the tablet held against her chest and stopped a professional distance away. "That bay is not showing on my board." "No, ma'am." "Somebody put a patient in there." "Yes, ma'am." "Then somebody needs to register him." The man's expression did not change at all. He would prefer not. Later, when she went over it 100 times, she would find that this was the moment. Not the wound, not the photograph. This. She could have turned around. She could have walked to the charge nurse and said, "There is an unregistered patient in 9 with 2 men on the door, and I am not going in there," and every policy in the building would have backed her. Every policy. She had read them. Instead, she felt something move in her chest that she had been carrying since she was 17 years old, and it was not fear and it was not curiosity. It was the flat-hot certainty that unregistered patients were how people disappeared. She pulled the curtain back and walked in. There were three men inside, not two. The third was sitting on the edge of the gurney with his jacket folded beside him, and his right hand pressed flat against his left side, and the white of his shirt had gone dark from the ribs down to the belt in a long soaked stripe. He looked up at her. He was somewhere near 40, dark-haired, close-cut beard gray at the temples, and his face had the specific stillness of a man who was hurting badly and had decided not to spend energy on showing it. His eyes were pale in a way that did not match the rest of him. "I asked for a physician," he said. "You are not registered as asking for anything." She set the tablet down and pulled a glove from the box on the wall. "Which means officially you are not here, which means officially I am not either, which means the two of us are about to have a very simple conversation. What is under your hand?" "A cut." "From what?" "From a cut." Nora snapped the second glove on. "Sir, I have been doing this for 11 years, and in 11 years exactly, nobody has ever answered that question that way, unless they already knew the answer was going to be a problem." Something happened in his face, not a smile. A shift the way water moves under ice. "Leave," he said, and both of the men in the suits went, and the curtains settled behind them. And Nora Beaumont was alone in a room that did not exist with a man who was not registered. She should have been afraid. She would think about that later, too. She would sit on the floor of her own bathroom at 4 in the morning and try to locate the fear and find that it had never arrived, and she would be more frightened by its absence than she would have been by its presence. "Take your hand away," she said. He did. She had seen a great many wounds. She had seen what a windshield does, and what a dog does, and what a man does when he is drunk and holding something. She had a certificate in a drawer at home that said she had been trained formally and at her own expense to look at damaged tissue and reconstruct the object that had caused it, and she had paid for that certificate. In nights she did not sleep across 2 years, and in 11 years she had used it professionally exactly 4 times because St. Ansgar Mercy had no forensic nurse examiner program and had declined twice to start one. She looked at the wound on his side and her whole body went cold. It was long, maybe 4 inches running along the line of the lower ribs. It was not straight, it curved. And at the deep end where the entry had been, the tissue was not sliced. It was torn in a small crescent, a shallow hooked gouge with a beveled edge on the inferior margin, as if whatever had gone in at an angle and then been dragged. She had seen that exact crescent 3 times before. She had seen it on a 51-year-old longshoreman named Elton Price, who had been logged as a fall from a domestic staircase. She had seen it on a 26-year-old named Deshawn, who had been logged as a bar altercation. She had seen it on a man who would not give a last name and had left before discharge and whose chart said only unwitnessed fall at home. All three had come in through the same doors between midnight and 4. All three had smelled of the river and diesel. All three had a callus pattern on the inside of the right hand that only came from 20 years of steel. It was a cargo hook, a pelican hook, the kind that hangs off a bar and that every dock worker on the lower Mississippi carries, and half of them have used on somebody at some point in their lives. She did not say any of that. She reached into her bag and took out a small plastic ruler with black gradations printed on it, and she laid it along the wound, and she took her phone out of her scrub pocket and photographed it. The room changed temperature. She heard him stop breathing, not gasp. Stop. A man who had not made a sound when she pulled his shirt away from clotted tissue held his breath at the sound of a phone camera. "What are you doing?" he said, "documenting." "Why?" "Because that is the job." She moved the ruler 2 inches and took a second photograph, then a third from a different angle, then a fourth of the small crescent by itself. "Every wound I treat gets photographed with the scale. Every single one. For 11 years. I do it for a kid who falls off a bike, and I do it for you. Nobody photographs a cut. I do." He was silent for a long moment. Then he said quietly, without any heat at all, "You just made me a file." And there it was. Nora put the phone back in her pocket. Her hand did not shake, which surprised her later more than anything else that happened that night. "I made a record," she said. "There is a difference. A file is something somebody else builds about you. A record is something that exists whether or not anybody wants it to. And in this hospital, sir, in this parish, on this river, the difference between those two things is about 47 men that I know of. She did not know why she said the number out loud. She had never said the number out loud. Not to Rayner, not to her mother, not to the union rep who had bought her a coffee 3 years ago and then stopped returning her calls. It came out of her the way blood comes out of a wound you did not know you had until you saw the floor. The man on the table looked at her for a very long time. "What is your name?" he said. "Nora Beaumont." "Elias Drakos." She knew the name. Everybody on the river knew the name. She had put a needle in his skin before she let herself react to it. "This is going to need irrigation and about 17 stitches," she said. "I am going to numb it first." "No. It is a local, lidocaine. 4 cc, it takes 90 seconds and then you feel nothing. No needle." "Mr. Dracos, I am about to put 17 sutures through the fascia along your ribs, and every one of them is going to sit right on top of an intercostal nerve. And I need you completely still for the entire thing. And I am telling you, as somebody who does this 3 or 4 times a night, that people do not stay still for that." He turned his head and looked at her, and there was something almost apologetic in it, which was the single most disorienting thing she had experienced in 3 years. "I do not go under things," he said. "Not for anyone, not for a minute." She understood, and without being told that this was not toughness, it was the opposite. It was a man who had at some point in his life lost consciousness in a room he should not have been unconscious in, and had made a decision about it, and had kept that decision for a very long time at considerable cost. She capped the syringe and set it aside. "Then this is going to hurt more than anything has hurt you in a while," she said. "Do not move. If you move, I stop and start again, and starting again is worse." He put his hands flat on the gurney rail, one on each side, and he nodded once. She irrigated the wound. She debrided the ragged crescent at the entry point, which she knew was the worst of it, and she watched sweat come out along his hairline in a single sheet, and she watched his knuckles go white on the rail, and she watched him not move a millimeter. She worked, stitch after stitch. The curved needle, the wrist rotation, her grandmother had drilled into her on a kitchen table in Arabi before she could spell her own name. The small tug, the knot, the cut. 17 times. Somewhere around stitch 9 he spoke. "Who taught you to measure?" "Nobody taught me. I taught myself out of a textbook at a kitchen table because the hospital would not pay for the course." "Why?" She tied off number 10 before she answered. "Because my father died on the Delta Crescent number 4 terminal 11 years ago, and the death certificate said cardiac event, and I was 17 and I believed it for about 6 months. And then a man who worked with him came to my mother's door and stood there with his hat in his hands and could not say the sentence he had come to say and left. And I have spent 11 years learning how to read the thing that man could not say." Dracos did not answer. She finished the last 4 stitches in silence, packed the wound, taped a dressing over it, and stripped her gloves. 48 hours dry, change the dressing daily, nothing over 10 pounds. The sutures come out in 10 days, and you are going to need an oral antibiotic starting tonight. And before you tell me you have resources, I want you to understand that if this gets infected, it will get infected fast because whatever went into you was not clean and had been in a lot of other places first. I was already buttoning his shirt with one hand. He reached into his jacket and came out with a fold of hundreds, and he held them out to her, and she stepped back so fast her hip hit the supply cart. "No, you saw. You worked. I get paid to work. By them. Badly, but by them." She pointed at the doorway. "The second I take money from a patient in an unregistered bay, I stop being a nurse and start being a person who was in a room. And a person who was in a room can be made to have never been in it. I have watched that happen to people. I am not doing it to myself." That she would think later was the first time she saw actual respect on his face, and she hated how much it landed. He put the money away. "They will try anyway," he said. "Try what?" "To make you a person who was never in a room." He stood, and he was very tall, and he did it without letting a single thing show on his face, which she found more impressive than anything else about him. "You should know that before you leave tonight, Miss Beaumont. Whatever you took a picture of is not going to be there in the morning." Nora laughed. It came out sharper than she meant. "Sir, I have been keeping 2 copies of everything since I was 19 years old." The curtain moved. One of the suited men came halfway in and bent and said 6 or 7 words in Greek against Dracos's ear. And Nora saw the exact instant the man's face closed, saw the temperature drop out of it, and she took an involuntary half-step back before she caught herself. Draco said something short in return. The man withdrew. At the curtain, Draco's paused. He did not turn all the way around. 10 days, he said, 10 days. And then he was gone, and the two men went with him, and Nora Beaumont stood alone in a bay that did not exist, holding a phone with 4 photographs on it, with her heart going so hard she could feel it in her teeth. She finished her shift. That was the thing nobody ever understood about her afterward. In the depositions, in the interviews, and the one podcast she agreed to and then regretted. She did not run to anyone. She did not call anyone. She went back out on the floor and she did 4 more hours because there were 40 people in the waiting room and one of her was not enough. And because doing the next task was the only thing that had ever kept her upright. At 6:50 in the morning, as she sat down at the nurse's station to close out her charts and she opened the patient encounter log to write up Bay 9 as an unregistered treatment, which she was required to do, and which she had every intention of doing, and which would have started an internal review, and which was the only reason she had allowed herself to walk out of that room at all. Bay 9 was not on the log, not blank, not flagged, not there. The log ran from Bay 8 to Bay 10. She scrolled up, she scrolled down, she refreshed, she logged out and logged back in, and her hands started to go cold, and she pulled the encounter list by timestamp instead of by location, and between 2:11 and 3:40. In the morning of that night, there were 9 encounters recorded at St. Ansgar Mercy, and she had personally handled 11. 2 were gone. She sat very still. Then she opened the imaging server where every photograph taken on a hospital device or uploaded from a personal one was mirrored automatically under the encounter number, because she had fought for that policy in a committee meeting 4 years ago and had won it, and it was the single accomplishment of her professional life she was proudest of. Her upload from that night was there in the directory listing. 4 files, timestamp 231, 0 bytes, all 4. Nora sat back in the chair and heard a sound come out of her own throat that she did not recognize. Somebody had not deleted them. Deleting them would have left a hole, and holes get audited. Somebody had gone in and emptied them so that the record showed a nurse who had uploaded 4 corrupt files, which happened all the time, which nobody would ever look at twice, which would be closed by IT within a week as a device error, and attributed to the nurse who was known for taking too many pictures. They had not erased the evidence. They had made her look sloppy. It was, she thought with a kind of sick admiration, extremely good work. It was the work of somebody who understood that you do not have to destroy a record. You only have to make the person who created it slightly unreliable. She walked out through the staff exit at 7:20 in the morning into heat that already felt like a hand on the back of her neck. There was a guard at the door she did not recognize. "Bag check, ma'am." She stopped. "Since when?" "New protocol. Started this week." He was maybe 30, polite, freshly shaved, wearing a St. Ansgar Mercy security polo that still had the fold creases in it. "Narcotics diversion audit. Everybody in and out. There has been no memo. Memo is coming Monday." Nora handed him her bag. He went through it the way somebody goes through a bag when they know exactly what they are looking for and have been told it is small. He took out her stethoscope and put it back. He took out her lunch container and put it back. He took out her wallet and opened it and closed it. He took out the small plastic scale ruler and turned it over twice in his hand before he set it down. Then he unzipped the interior pocket, which nobody had ever unzipped in 11 years, and felt around inside it with 2 fingers and found nothing. "Thank you, ma'am. Have a good morning." Nora took her bag and walked out into the parking lot and made it 40 steps before she had to stop and put her hand on the hood of somebody's car. The memory card was in her bra. It had been in her bra since 2:33 in the morning, when she had walked directly from Bay 9 to the supply closet and pulled it out of the little card reader she carried and put it where she had been putting things since she was 19 years old and had learned one very bad afternoon in a courthouse hallway in Gretna that documents in bags can be taken and documents against skin cannot. She had not done it because she suspected anything. She had done it because she always did it, because she had done it 11,000 times, because it was as automatic to her as washing her hands. She stood in a hospital parking lot in the August heat and started to laugh, and then the laugh went sideways into something else, and she got in her car before it finished. Her apartment was in Bywater, a second-floor unit above a shotgun that had been a single-family house before somebody chopped it in half in the 70s. Her mother had the downstairs. That had been the arrangement for 4 years since Colleen Beaumont's hip, and it worked in the way arrangements between mothers and daughters work, which is to say it was load-bearing and nobody discussed it. Nora let herself in upstairs, locked the door, sat on the edge of her bed and pulled the tin box out from underneath it. It had been a Christmas cookie tin once. It was a light blue thing with a picture of a cardinal on a snowy branch, which was a stupid image for southern Louisiana and had been stupid when her grandmother received it in 1994. It was heavy now. She opened it. 47 folders. Each one a manila quarterfold, each one with a number written on the tab in her handwriting. Each one containing a printed photograph with a scale in the frame, a page of her own notes in her own hand, a copy of whatever the official record had said, and a single index card comparing the two. 47 men, all of them dock workers or terminal mechanics or crane operators from the Delta Crescent terminal system. All of them arriving at St. Ansgar Mercy between midnight and 4. All of them with an official mechanism of injury that did not match their tissue. Fell downstairs at home. Fell downstairs at home. Bar altercation. Fell downstairs at home. Unwitnessed fall. Struck by falling branch. Fell downstairs at home. Nobody's home had that many stairs. Nobody's parish had that many branches. She laid the newest folder out, the one she had started on the drive back, and she pulled the card out of her bra and put it on the bed and looked at it and did not put it in the reader yet. Then she reached to the very bottom of the tin and took out the folder that was more worn than any of the others, the one whose fold had gone soft as cloth from being opened. On age 49, crane operator, 22 years, died on Terminal 4 at 4:40 in the afternoon on a Tuesday in the middle of a shift with 60 people within 100 yards of him. Cause of death, acute cardiac event. Attending physician, signature illegible, stamped M. Thibodeau, MD. No autopsy, family declined, said the file. Nora had been 17 and her mother had been 46, and neither of them had declined anything, because neither of them had been asked. She had exactly one photograph in that folder, and she had not taken it. It was a Polaroid a man named Sam Delacroix had put in her hand at the wake, and it showed her father's left forearm on the funeral home table, and there was no scale in the frame because Sam Delacroix was a crane operator and not a nurse, and along the forearm there was a curved mark, a crescent, hooked, beveled on the inferior margin. Nora had been looking at that Polaroid for 11 years. It was the reason she had bought the textbook. It was the reason she had bought the certificate. It was the reason she photographed every wound she had ever treated with a ruler in the frame, because she had one picture of the only thing that mattered, and it was useless in a courtroom, and she had sworn at 19 years old that nobody would ever be able to say that about anything she produced ever again. And tonight a man had walked into her bay with the exact same mark on him. Fresh, wet, 4 hours old, which meant the object that made it was still on the river, which meant it was not history, it was ongoing. She was still sitting there when she heard her mother on the outside stairs, the particular double sound of a cane and a bad hip, and then the door. Because Colleen Beaumont had never in her life knocked on a door she paid half the rent on. You are supposed to be asleep. I am about to be. Her mother came in 3 steps and stopped, and Nora watched her see the tin. Colleen Beaumont had worked in the laundry at St. Ansgar Mercy for 19 years. She was a woman who had folded 400,000 sheets and had a body that showed it. She had buried a husband at 46 and raised a daughter alone on wages that did not permit it, and she had never once in 11 years said her husband's name out loud in that apartment. She looked at the open cookie tin on the bed, and every bit of color went out of her face. Close the box, Nora. Mama, close it. Her voice cracked on the second word, and she hated that Nora could see her hate it. You said you stopped. 4 years ago at that lawyer's office, you sat there and you said to me out loud that you had stopped. I said I stopped taking it to lawyers. That is not the same thing, and you knew it was not the same thing when you said it. They are still doing it. Nora stood up. She had not meant to stand up. Mama, a man came into my bay last night with the same mark Daddy had. Not similar, the same hook, same angle, same bevel. That thing is still out there, and somebody is still swinging it, and somebody in this building is still signing the paper afterward. And last night that person went into my server and hollowed out my photographs while I was on the floor working. Her mother did not move. They erased them. They zeroed them. which is worse because now it looks like I am careless. Colleen Beaumont looked at the tin for a long moment. Then she looked at her daughter, and there was something in her face that Nora had never been able to name and would not be able to name for another 5 weeks when a piece of paper came out of a filing cabinet in a lawyer's office in Metairie and named it for her. 47, her mother said. 47 that came through my doors. There are more. There have to be more because I only work nights and I only work 3 days a week and I have only been there 11 years. And what do you think happens to you, Colleen said very quietly, the day somebody decides you are the problem? They already decided that. This morning, at the door, with a bag search that started this week and has no memo. Her mother closed her eyes. Then it has started, she said. And Nora heard it. She heard the word started and the way her mother said it like a woman recognizing weather she had lived through before, and something went over her like cold water in a hot room. Mama, what has started? Her mother opened her eyes and said, "Go to sleep, Nora," and turned around and went down the stairs, cane and hip, and shut her own door. Nora slept 4 hours. She did not mean to. She lay down on top of the covers with the tin still open on the floor, and her phone on her chest and the card in her fist, and the body took what it was owed. She dreamed about her father's hands. She always dreamed about the hands. At 6:14 in the morning, she woke up because of a sound. It was not a loud sound. That was what confused her at first, lying there in the dark, with her heart already going, trying to find the edge of it. It was not sirens, and it was not shouting, and it was not the neighbor's dog. It was low and broad and continuous the way a stadium sounds from the parking lot before anybody has scored a sound made of many bodies breathing and shifting and standing in one place. She got up. Her legs did not feel entirely like hers. She walked to the front window and put her hand on the curtain and stood there for 3 full seconds without pulling it because some part of her knew that whatever was on the other side was going to divide her life into a before and an after, and she wanted 3 more seconds of before. Then she pulled it back. The street was full, not crowded, full, shoulder to shoulder, curb to curb, spilling from the corner of Piety all the way down past the shotgun on the far end and around out of sight, men standing in the blue light before sunrise in absolute silence. No shouting, no signs, no motion. She stopped counting at 90 and understood it was more than double that. Every one of them was facing her window. And Nora Beaumont, standing barefoot in a shirt she had slept in, with a memory card still closed in her right hand, took in the one detail that made no sense at all and that she would not understand for another 11 minutes. Not one of them was wearing a suit. Every man in that street was wearing work boots. Work boots. Nora stood at the window with her hands still on the curtain and did the arithmetic her body had already done without her. Men who came to hurt you did not wear steel toes and stand in a straight line. Men who came to hurt you did not stand still at all. She pulled on jeans. She did not brush her hair. She put the memory card in the front right pocket of the jeans because the bra had already been searched once, and she went down the outside stairs barefoot, and every single head in that street turned when the screen door hit the frame. Nobody moved toward her. That was the thing that nearly broke her. 200 men, and not one of them took a step because the ones in front had been told not to, and they were the kind of men who had spent their whole lives holding a line somebody else had drawn. A man came forward out of the front rank, 60-something, gray stubble forearms like bridge cable, a local 1682 windbreaker in August, which told her he had put it on deliberately. I took his cap off. That was when Nora's throat closed because that was what Sam Delacroix had done at her father's wake. And it turned out the gesture had never stopped meaning the same thing. "Miss Beaumont, who are you?" "Ruben Ordonez, safety steward, local 1682. His voice was rough and completely steady. "We are not here to trouble you. There are 200 men on my street at 6 in the morning. 211, he said. "We counted. We wanted you to be able to count." Nora looked past him. In the second row, a man was holding a sheet of paper against his chest with both hands, the way you hold something in the rain. In the fifth row, another one. She looked down the line, and it was everywhere. Paper, 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 one. In every 3 or 4 hands, and every sheet had the same shape and the same density of print. Her stomach dropped before her brain caught up. "What is that?" she said. "What are you holding?" Ordonez turned his cap over in his hands. "Word came down last night that they are going to take your license," he said. "Narcotics, diversion, that they already opened it and it is already moving, and that by the end of the month you will not be a nurse." Nobody has told me that. No, ma'am, they do not tell you. They tell everybody else first, so that when they tell you, you have already been alone for a month. He said it the way a man says something he has watched happen. We heard about 10 o'clock last night. We started calling. Calling who? Everybody who ever had you. He gestured behind him without turning around one short movement of the cap. Every man on this street was treated by you at St. Ansgar, or his brother was, or his crew was. That is not 200 people. Ma'am, it is a lot more than 200 people. This is who could get here by 6. And a man in the third row unfolded his sheet and held it up over his head with both arms so she could see it, and Nora saw her own handwriting photocopied, 11 years old and gone gray, in a mechanism of injury box. Load-bearing crushed dorsal, aspect 4, digits uniform vector. Not consistent with reported fall. She had written that. She had written that at a nurse's station on a Tuesday and gone back to work and never thought about it again. You kept those, she said. We kept every one. Ordonez's jaw worked. Miss Beaumont, when a man gets hurt out there, he gets carried in, and somebody who is not him tells the desk what happened. And by the time the paperwork is done, he is a man who fell down at home. And then comp denies him because you do not get comp for falling down at home. And then the union files and comp shows the union, the chart, and the chart says he fell down at home, and the union sits down. That is the whole machine. That is all of it. He stopped. He had to. Except sometimes he drew you, he said, and when he drew you, the chart said what actually happened to him. And that one line in your handwriting is the only reason 40-some men in this parish got paid. Paid. My nephew is one of them. He has 3 fingers in a settlement, and the settlement is because of 11 words you wrote at 2 in the morning and forgot. Somebody in the middle of the street said her father's name. Not shouted. Said. And it went through the crowd the way a word goes through men who have all agreed not to say it, and Nora felt her legs go. We are not asking you to fight for us, Ordonez said. We came so that when they come for you, you would know how many of us there are. That is all. We will go now. No, it came out of her too fast. No, wait. She looked at 211 men standing in the street outside a shotgun house in Bywater and heard herself say the thing she had never said to anyone except her mother once, 4 hours ago. There are 47, she said, in a box under my bed, 47 files where the tissue does not match the paper. I have been building it for 11 years and I have never had one witness. Not one. Every man I ever asked said he could not. Nobody spoke. Then from somewhere back in the 4th or 5th rank, an old voice said, I will. The crowd opened. Sam Delacroix was 71 years old and walked like every joint in him had been paid for in installments. He came up the middle of that street slow, and men put their hands on his back as he passed, and he stopped 6 feet from her and looked at her the way he had looked at her at the wake when he had put a Polaroid in her hand and had not been able to say the sentence. I could not say it then, he said. I have had 11 years to practice. Nora Beaumont sat down on her own front step in front of 200 men and put her hands over her face. By 8 o'clock, she had 31 names on a legal pad, and her hand hurt from writing. By 9, the street was empty and looked like nothing had ever happened in it, which was its own kind of frightening. By 9:15, a black car she did not recognize stopped at the corner and did not park. Elias Dracos got out of the back of it, moving like a man who had been told to move normally and was managing about 70%. Nora met him on the sidewalk because she was not letting him near her mother's door. You have a fever, she said. Good morning to you also. You are flushed at the cheekbones and you are guarding and you are 2 days out from a contaminated wound. And if you tell me you have resources, I am going to walk back inside. He almost smiled. I have a doctor. You have somebody with a prescription pad. That is not the same animal. She folded her arms. Why are you at my house? Because at 6:14 this morning, 200 men stood in this street and my phone rang 11 times in 4 minutes. He looked at her and the pale eyes were doing something she did not like, which was measuring. Every one of those calls asked me the same question. Whether they were mine. Were they? No. He let that sit. Which is the part that concerns me, Miss Beaumont. In this parish, 200 men do not assemble unless somebody paid for it or somebody permitted it, and I didn't either, and I am not accustomed to being surprised on a street 6 blocks from my own terminal. They came because I write things down. I know what you write down. I felt you do it. He shifted his weight, and she watched him regret it. I want the name of the man who cut me. There it was. She had been waiting for it since the car door opened. I do not have a name. You have a shape. I have a shape. Then tell me the shape. Nora looked at him for a long moment and made a decision that she would defend under oath twice and never once feel good about. No, she said, but I will trade you. Dracos went very still, and she understood that whatever else this man was, nobody had said that word to him in a long time, and it had done something interesting to his blood pressure. Trade. The clinic log. Delta Crescent runs an occupational health trailer on the terminal apron. Every man who gets hurt out there passes through it before he goes anywhere else. And somebody in that trailer writes a first report of injury, and that first report is the original. The chart at my hospital is the copy of a lie. The trailer log is where the lie gets made. She kept her voice flat. Get me the trailer log, 3 years of it, and I will tell you exactly what kind of object opened your ribs and roughly how tall the man holding it was. That log is not in my company. No, it is in Delta Crescent's risk management office, and Delta Crescent leases your berths, and you have been on that apron every week for 15 years, and do not stand on my sidewalk with a fever and tell me you cannot get a binder out of a trailer. Something moved across his face that she did not have a category for. You have thought about this before today, he said. Mr. Dracos, I have thought about this every night for 11 years. I was quiet. Then he said 2 days. Also, you are going to let me look at that wound before you get back in that car. No, then no trade. He looked at her with what was very close to outrage, and she stood there with her arms crossed and did not blink. And eventually he made a sound in his chest that was not a laugh and got in the back of the car and let her cut the dressing off in a parked vehicle on Piety Street at 9:30 in the morning. It was bad, not catastrophic yet, but the margins had gone hot and tight, and the drainage had turned, and she pressed once lightly and watched him grip the door handle. This is going to septic in about 40 hours, she said. You need IV antibiotics, and you need them today, not from a man with a pad. I will handle it. You will not, because men like you never do, because you think pain is a negotiation. She taped a fresh dressing gown harder than she needed to. 2 days, you said. I want that log inside 2 days. Because in about 40 hours, you are either going to be on a drip or you are going to be a very expensive corpse, and either way, I do not get my binder. That was when he laughed, and it clearly hurt him. She did not sleep. She sat at her kitchen table and worked the 31 names against the 47 folders and found 19 overlaps. And she started building a spreadsheet on a laptop that was 6 years old. And at 4 in the afternoon, somebody knocked, and it was not a knock, she knew. The woman on the landing was in her early 50s, in a linen jacket holding a leather folder, and she had the specific, unbothered warmth of a person who had never once in her professional life been the one waiting. Miss Beaumont, Adelaide Kroll, I run risk for Delta Crescent terminals. She smiled. May I sit down? My knees are terrible, and those stairs are a war crime. Nora let her in because she wanted to see what was in the folder. Kroll put the folder on the table and did not open it. I am going to skip the part where I pretend I do not know what is in the box under your bed, she said pleasantly, because I think we would both find it insulting. Nora's blood stopped. That is quite a sentence. It is. I apologize for it. I have been in this job 19 years, and I have found that the longest route to a solution is always the polite one. Kroll folded her hands. You have been documenting injury mechanism inconsistencies on Delta Crescent employees since 2014. You have 40-some of them. You have never taken it anywhere because every lawyer you approached told you the same thing, which is that a nurse's contemporaneous notes are not worth the paper without an employer record to contradict, and you have never had the employer record. You have been in my life. I have been in my own files, Miss Beaumont. Yours simply cast a shadow across them. Kroll tilted her head. I want to offer you a job. Nora laughed out loud. I am serious. Director of Occupational Health Documentation. It is a new position. I wrote it last week. It reports to me, and it exists because I read your notes and concluded that you are the best injury documentarian on this river and that we have been wasting you. She named a number. It was 4 times what St. Ansgar Mercy paid. Full authority to standardize the first report process across all 6 terminals. You would fix the exact problem you have spent 11 years cataloging. From the inside in 18 months instead of never. And the terrible thing, the genuinely terrible thing was that Nora felt it land. Not the money, that 18 months. You would own me, she said. I would employ you. Those are different, and I think you know they are different. And I think the reason you are so certain they are not is that you have never had any power and it has made you superstitious about it. Kroll said it without cruelty, which made it worse. Let me tell you what I actually do because everyone imagines it is more interesting than it is. She opened the folder then. It was full of actuarial tables. Delta Crescent employs 4,100 people directly on the lower river. Our insurance is placed through a syndicate that reprices annually on loss experience. If our reported lost time incident rate goes above a threshold, and it is not a high threshold, our premium does not increase. Our coverage is withdrawn. In a marine terminal that cannot show coverage, cannot hold its lease, in a terminal that loses its lease closes, and the cargo goes to Mobile and Houston, and it does not come back ever because it never has anywhere in the history of this industry. She turned a page. In 2011, we were 4 incidents from that threshold. 4, in a year with 900,000 man-hours. So you move them. So I made a decision, Kroll said, and I have never once told myself it was a good one. I am not here to tell you I am a good person. I am here to tell you what the alternative was because nobody ever asks. The alternative was 4,100 jobs in this parish, where the median household is $31,000 and the second largest employer is a casino. You crippled 47 men. I processed 47 men through a claims pathway that paid them without triggering a reportable. Kroll's voice did not rise. Every one of them got money. Not enough, but money. Elton Price got $61,000. He would have gotten 0 in a closed terminal, and so would the other 4,000. He got $61,000 in a hand that does not open. Yes, Kroll said, and I signed it, and I will carry it, and I would do it again because I have run the other version 100 times, and in the other version, he still does not have a hand, and nobody has a job. The apartment was silent. You want to know what I actually think of you, Miss Beaumont? Kroll closed the folder. I think you are the only honest person in a 200-mile radius, and I think that is going to get an enormous number of people hurt, because you have the luxury of one variable. Truth, I have 4,000, and the difference between us is not virtue, it is scope. Nora sat there with her hands flat on her own table and understood with a kind of vertigo that this was the first argument in 11 years that she could not immediately dismantle. Get out of my house, she said quietly. Of course. Kroll stood and paused at the door and said the only cruel thing she said all afternoon. Ask your mother about November of 2014. Before you decide I am the villain of this. Ask her. At 7 that evening, Nora's badge stopped working at the staff entrance, and the same fresh-shaved guard would not meet her eyes. At 7:20, she was in a 4th-floor conference room across a table from a nurse manager who had trained her an HR representative, who had flown in from Baton Rouge, and Dr. Amos Rayner, who did not look up. Administrative leave pending investigation, the HR representative said. It is not a disciplinary finding. It is a pause. On what allegation? An anonymous report regarding discrepancies in controlled substance, waste documentation over an 18-month period. Anonymous. Yes. Filed when? The woman checked. She should not have checked. 11 days ago, Nora went cold all the way to her fingertips. 11 days, she said. I treated the patient in Bay 9 2 nights ago. This was filed 11 days ago. Miss Beaumont? No, you do not understand what you just told me. She was standing. She did not remember standing. This did not start because of Dracos. This started before him, which means this was already coming, and he had nothing to do with it, which means somebody decided 11 days ago that I was a problem, and I have spent 2 days thinking I knew why. Nobody in the room said anything, and in the silence, Nora looked at Amos Reiner, who was studying the table. Amos, do not, he said. Amos, look at me. He looked up, and he had the face of a man at a funeral. I signed the referral, he said. Nora, they came to me with a waste log and asked me if your documentation had ever concerned me, And I said yes, because it has. Because you write things in charts that nobody asked you to write, and it has concerned me for 4 years, and I did not know what they were building until I saw the form. You have a daughter starting at Loyola. Yes, he said, I do. She walked out. She got as far as the second floor landing before her hands started shaking so badly she had to sit on the stairs. Her phone rang at 11 that night with an unknown number. Are you sitting? Draco said. His voice was wrong, thick at the edges. You are on a drip. I am on a drip. A pause and a breath she did not like. 2 days, I said. It took 9 hours. I have your log. How much of it? 4 years, not 3. It is in a box in my study, and I have read enough of it to be sorry that I did. Another breath. Miss Beaumont, there is a name in this log that appears on 11 of the first reports as a reporting supervisor, and I need you to hear it before you come. Say it. Costa Dracos, he said. My cousin, he runs my apron crews. Nora closed her eyes. Elias. There is more, and it is worse, and I would rather say it in a room. His voice went flat in the way that men's voices go flat right before they hand you something they cannot put down. In the log, there is a payment column, third-party safety consultancy, quarterly, 4 years. To who? To an entity, he said, that I own. The line hummed. Say the rest of it. Delta Crescent has been paying my company $820,000 a year, and the invoices say safety consultancy, and there is no consultancy, and there never was. He stopped. When he spoke again, it was very quiet. I signed those invoices. I signed them in my own hand for 4 years, and I never once asked what the money was for because 800,000 is not a large number to me, and I did not look. Nora sat down on the floor of her kitchen. What was it for? She said, even though she already knew. It was for the union to sit down, Elias Dracos said. It was for men to stay quiet after they got hurt. Miss Beaumont, you have been building a case for 11 years against a machine, and I am telling you now, before you walk into my house, that I am a part of that machine. I did not build it. I did not run it. But it fed through me, and it paid me, and I let it. Nora looked at the cookie tin on the floor by her feet, at 47 folders, and the one at the bottom that had gone soft as cloth. Then you are not going to be the man who protects me, she said. No. You are going to be a witness, and after you are a witness, you are going to be a defendant. There was a long silence on the line, and when he answered, his voice had something in it she had not heard from him before, which was fear. Yes, he said, I know. Vivian Okafor did not argue with her, which was how Nora knew it was as bad as she thought. Say the whole list, Vivian said, out loud. Do not soften any of it. I have watched 3 cases die because somebody softened it in the first phone call. Nora put the 2 pages side by side on her kitchen table and read her own destruction off them like a shift report. I treated an unregistered patient. Twice more after that off premises, including in a parked car. I did not report either encounter. I photographed patient wounds on a personal device and kept the copies at home for 11 years on 47 people who never consented to it. I accepted $6,000 that originated from that patient's attorney, and I am currently under investigation for controlled substance diversion, which is not true, but which is open and which will still be open in 8 months when this goes to a grand jury. Anything else? My mother signed a release and took $218,000. Anything else? Nora closed her eyes. I did not go to the police in 2017 when I had 11 files, or in 2019 when I had 26. I told myself I was building. I was also afraid, and I was also 31 years old and paying rent, and a defense attorney is going to make that sound like exactly what it was. There was a long silence. Okay, Vivian said. Now I am going to tell you the thing you already know and do not want said in your own kitchen. There is one way through this, and you are not going to like it, and if you do not do it in the next 72 hours, somebody else will do a worse version of it for you. Say it. You have to burn yourself first, Vivian said. Every single thing on that list has to come out of your mouth in a formal setting on a record before Kroll's lawyer gets to say it, because a fact a witness confessed is a fact. A fact a lawyer extracted is a scandal. Same words, completely different animal. Nora looked at the cookie tin sitting on the floor by the table. That means the board, she said. That means the board. That means my license. That means your license, Vivian said, and did not pretend otherwise. Nora, I am not going to sit here and tell you there is a version where you keep it. You broke real rules. Some of them for good reasons, and one or two of them for reasons that were just you being stubborn. And it does not matter because the Louisiana State Board of Nursing does not weigh motive the way you want it to. Nora sat with that. 11 years, 2 years of night classes for a certificate the hospital would not pay for, $19,000 of her own money, 400,000 sheets her mother had folded in that building so that a girl from Araby could stand in a bay at 2 in the morning and be the one person in the room who knew how to read a wound. If I give them the license, she said slowly, does the archive survive? That is the whole question, and I am not going to lie to you about the answer. It might. The ledger stands on its own now, and Thibodeau authenticated it, and the autopsy is a board-certified pathologist's work, not yours. Vivian's voice steadied. You do not have to be credible for the ledger to be true. You only have to stop being the thing they can point at. And the only way to stop being the thing they can point at is to already be holding your own head when they reach for it. Nora looked at the 2 pages on the table for a long time. Set it up, she said. She filed the self-report on a Wednesday morning. 11 pages in her own words, no attorney's polish on any of it because Vivian said a polished self-report reads like a negotiation and an ugly one reads like a confession. She listed every off-record treatment by date. She listed the money. She listed the photographs and gave the exact number 47, and then corrected it in the same paragraph to say that the true number of patients photographed over 11 years was closer to 9,000, and that 47 were the ones she had retained, and that the retention was the violation, and that she had known it was a violation at the time and had done it anyway. She surrendered the license voluntarily in the same document. She did not ask for a hearing. She did not ask for a suspension with a path to reinstatement. Vivian begged her to leave that door open, and she refused, and it was the only fight they had. You are throwing away a thing you cannot get back to make a point, Vivian said. I'm throwing away a thing I cannot get back so that when Kroll's lawyer stands up and says this woman broke the rules, the answer is yes, she said. So she said so first, and she paid for it before you opened your mouth. The hearing was 90 minutes, and Nora would remember almost none of it except for one exchange near the end. When a board member she had never met a woman about 60 with reading glasses pushed up into her hair, took off the glasses and set them down. Miss Beaumont, she said, in 18 years on this board, I have never had anyone bring me this much. Usually we have to go find it. I want to ask you a question that is not on any form. Do you understand what you are giving up? Yes, ma'am. I do not think you do. I think you are angry, and I think anger makes people generous with things they will want back in 5 years. Ma'am, my father fell 11 feet out of a crane cab in front of 60 people in 2014 and a doctor wrote cardiac event, Nora said. I have spent 11 years learning how to prove that. I am not confused about the exchange rate. The board accepted the surrender. She walked out of a building in Baton Rouge at 2 in the afternoon, no longer a nurse, and she got in her car and sat there and did not cry. And then she drove 40 minutes and pulled off on the shoulder near La Place and cried for 25 minutes with both hands on the wheel, and then she wiped her face and drove home, and that was the entire funeral she gave it. The narcotics investigation closed 11 days later. Unsubstantiated. Nobody called to tell her. She found out because Amos Reiner drove to Bywater and knocked on her door and stood there in the heat with his hands at his sides. It was nothing, he said. There was no diversion. The waste variances were a pump calibration error on the third floor Pyxis. It went back 19 months. It affected 6 nurses, and yours was the smallest of the 6. Nora looked at him. You put me in that room, she said. Yes. You sat there while a woman from Baton Rouge read the word anonymous out loud, and you did not open your mouth. Yes. Say the rest of it, Amos. You have driven all the way here, so say the rest of it. Reiner's mouth worked. Somebody from the foundation board came to my office in July, he said. Not administration, the foundation. He asked me in a very friendly way whether documentation practices in the emergency department had ever given me concern. And I said yes, because they had, because you scared me. Nora, you have scared me for 4 years. You write things nobody asks you to write, and you do not care what it costs. And I have a mortgage and a daughter, and I am 53, and I am not brave. His voice broke on the last word, and he let it. And I told myself I was answering a question honestly, And then I saw the referral form with my initials on it, and I understood that I had been the instrument, and I have not slept properly since. Are you here for absolution? No, he shook his head. I am here because I resigned Friday and I wrote a statement about that July conversation and gave it to your investigator, and I wanted to say it to your face before you read it. That is all. I am not asking you for anything. Nora stood in her doorway and found that she did not have any anger available for him, which surprised her and then did not, because she had spent 11 years learning that the machine was made almost entirely of decent people at the exact edge of what they could afford. Amos, she said, the drop-down menu on their injury form has 11 options, and none of them is another human being. Nobody ever had to lie. They just built a form where the truth was not one of the choices. He stared at her. That is the whole thing, he said. That is the whole thing. Her mother was harder. Colleen Beaumont read the non-disclosure agreement Kroll had left on the table twice, and then set it down and said, so that is it then, in the flat voice of a woman who has been waiting 11 years for a bill to arrive. No, Mama, that is not it. They will read it out in a courtroom. They will read it out in a courtroom whether you testify or not, because it exists, and the only variable is whether the jury hears it first from a lawyer holding it up like a dead animal or from you. Nora crouched down in front of her mother's chair. Mama, there is one person on this earth who can explain what that room in Metairie was like, and it is not me, because I was 17 and I was at a friend's house eating pizza while it happened. They will take the money back. Yes. All of it. And the house is against it, Nora. I put the house up in 2019 when the roof went. I know. Then you know what you are asking me for. I know exactly what I am asking you for, Nora said. And I am asking anyway. And if you tell me no, I will never bring it up again as long as I live, and I will mean that. Colleen Beaumont sat in her own kitchen with her hands in her lap for a full minute. He came home the night before, she said finally. Nora went still. Your daddy. Yeah, the night before, he sat right there and he said there was a boy on the crew, 19 years old, and somebody had gone at him with a hook over a load, and Wendell had gotten in between it. And he said, I am going to say something Monday. And I said, say it to who, Wendell? And he did not have an answer, and we went to bed. Her mother's face did not move at all. And on Tuesday, he was dead. And in November, I signed a piece of paper saying I would never ask why. And I have carried that sentence around for 11 years, and I have never said it out loud in this house. Mama, I will testify, Colleen said. Not for you. Do you understand me? Not for you, and not for those 47 men either, God forgive me. For the sentence. Because I have never said it, and I want to say it once where somebody has to write it down. Elias Dracos went in on a Tuesday. He did it without telling her, which she was angry about, for approximately 4 hours, and then understood. He walked into the United States Attorney's office in New Orleans with 2 attorneys and 4 bankers' boxes, and gave them the entirety of Dracos Maritime's payment records going back 6 years, including $820,000 a year in safety consultancy invoices that he had personally signed and for which no consultancy had ever been performed. He proffered against his own cousin, Costa Dracos' apron supervisor, whose name appeared as reporting supervisor on 11 of the first reports of injury, and whose personal cargo hook, a hook he had carried since he was 22, was seized out of a locker on Terminal 4 and matched to a wound photograph taken with a plastic ruler in an unregistered bay at 2:30 in the morning. Nora saw him once during that period in a hallway outside a federal grand jury room, and she had about 90 seconds. You did not have to give them 6 years, she said. 4 would have been enough for your case. 6 is enough for mine. He looked terrible. He had lost 15 pounds, and the wound had left a raised ridge along his ribs that she could see through his shirt when he turned. Miss Beaumont, I have been thinking about something you said on the telephone. Which thing? You said I was not going to be the man who protected you. You said I was going to be a witness and then a defendant. He almost smiled. I have run a company for 15 years, and in 15 years, not one person has said a true thing to me on the first attempt. Elias, they are going to give you 11 years. 12, my attorney thinks, perhaps 9 with cooperation. He said it the way other men discuss a flight delay. I want you to hear something, and then I want you to go, because your investigator is looking at me, and she does not like me, and she is right not to. I am not doing this for you. I would like to tell you that I am, and it would be more romantic, and you would not believe it anyway. Then why? Because I signed a piece of paper, $800,000 a year for 4 years, and never asked what it bought, he said. And what it bought was that a man with 3 fingers did not get to say what happened to his hand. And I did not swing anything. I did not order anything. I simply did not look, and I was paid extremely well not to look, and I have decided that I would rather go to prison for that than spend the rest of my life being a man who did not look. Nora did not say anything. Goat, he said, you have work. The trial ran 19 days. The government did not lead with Nora. Vivian fought for that and won it, and it was the correct call because by the time Nora Beaumont took the stand on day 11, the jury had already spent a week and a half looking at a green ledger with a cracked spine. Marcus Thibodeau testified for 2 days. He was 68 and his hands shook, and he did not defend himself once. And on the second afternoon, a defense attorney asked him why he had kept the second book. And the old man said, because I wanted somebody someday to know that I saw it. And 3 jurors looked away. Colleen Beaumont testified for 50 minutes. The defense put the non-disclosure agreement up on a screen with her signature blown up 4 feet wide and asked her whether she had been paid to keep silent, and she said yes. Asked whether she had spent the money, and she said yes, on her daughter's education and a roof. Asked whether she understood she was now going to lose all of it, and she said yes. And then the attorney made the only real mistake of the entire trial, which was asking one question too many. Mrs. Beaumont, why are you here? Because my husband sat in my kitchen the night before he died and told me a boy on his crew got hit with a hook and he was going to say something Monday, Colleen said. And I asked him say it to who, and he did not have an answer. And I have carried that question around for 11 years, and there is finally somebody in a room who has to write it down. The courtroom did not make a sound. Nora testified on day 11 for 6 hours and 40 minutes, and for the first 3 hours, the defense did exactly what Kroll had promised. They walked her through every violation, the unregistered treatment, the parked car on Piety Street, the $6,000, the photographs of 9,000 people who never consented. And every single time Nora said yes before the question was finished. You treated a patient off the record. Yes, twice more after that. I reported all 3 myself in writing on the 29th. You accepted money originating from that patient. $6,000 wired from his attorney's firm to a funeral home in Urabai to pay for a private autopsy on a 71-year-old man who was scheduled for cremation 26 hours after he died by an order placed by his employer before his daughter was notified. I disclosed it in writing on the 29th. It is in the file in front of you. You surrendered your nursing license. I did, because you were facing discipline. No, sir, I surrendered it 14 days before the board's investigation opened in a document I filed myself listing violations nobody had accused me of. She looked at the jury for the first time, which Vivian had told her to do exactly once. I gave it up because I was going to be standing here and because a defense attorney was going to hold my career up in front of you and ask you to look at it instead of the ledger. So I got rid of it. Now there is nothing to look at except the ledger. The defense attorney sat down 11 minutes later. Adelaide Kroll took the stand in her own defense against the advice of her counsel, and she did not lie about one single thing, and it was the most frightening 3 hours of the entire trial. She put the actuarial tables up. She walked the jury through the syndicate threshold, the loss experience calculation, the least covenant, the 4,100 jobs, the median household income in that parish, the closures at other terminals in other decades that had never reversed. She said the words, I made the decision 11 times and never once said the words I was told to. And under cross-examination, when the prosecutor asked her whether she had ever in 19 years considered simply reporting the injuries, honestly, she said, every year, every single year in October when the renewal packet came. And every year I ran it, and every year the answer was that honest reporting closed the terminal within 2 renewal cycles. And I chose the version where 47 men were injured and underpaid over the version where 47 men were injured, underpaid, and 4,000 people lost their jobs. She looked at the jury the same way Nora had. You are going to convict me, and you should. But I want it on the record that not one person in this building has offered a third option, and I have been asking for one for 19 years. The jury was out for 6 days, convicted on 9 counts. Obstruction, falsification of records in a federal investigation, wire fraud conspiracy. Acquitted on 2, she got 11 years and did not appeal. Costa Dracos pleaded on the eve of trial and got 22 years because there was a hook in an evidence locker with a beveled edge in a photograph of Elias Dracos' ribs and another photograph older. Worse, of a forearm on a funeral home table in a Polaroid taken by a crane operator who had not known what he was doing and had done it anyway. There was no charge for Wendell Beaumont. There could not be. The statute had run, the body had been in the ground 11 years, and the only witness to what happened on that apron, in July of 2014, was a line of 9 words in a green ledger that said the word witnessed and did not say by whom. Nora had known that from the beginning. She still sat in her car in the courthouse garage for an hour after they told her. The settlement came out of the civil side 6 months later. 47 families. It averaged out to a little over $400,000 apiece, and the lawyers took a third, and it was by any honest measure not nearly enough. And Toby Renard bought a house with his and sent Nora a photograph of the front porch with no message attached. And then the other thing happened, the thing Nora had told 11 men in a union hall would happen, and had privately half hoped she was wrong about. Delta Crescent lost the lease on Terminals 3 and 4. 311 jobs. Not 4,000, because Kroll had been wrong about the total collapse, and Nora held on to that for years afterward, the way you hold on to a handrail. But 311 was not an abstraction. 311 was a man named Perry Doucette, who had been on that apron for 26 years, and who stopped Nora outside a Winn-Dixie in Arabi and said, not shouting, which made it so much worse, "I got hurt out there too. Twice. I never said nothing, and I would do it again because I was going to retire in 4 years, and now I am 58 years old with nothing." "I know," Nora said. "You do not know." "No," she said. "You are right. I do not." He walked away, and she stood in that parking lot for a long time. Her mother lost the death benefit. All 218,000 of it plus interest entered as a judgment. They lost the house on Piety in the spring, and Colleen Beaumont moved into a 1-bedroom in Chalmette that Nora paid for out of a job that was not nursing. And on the day they cleared the last of it out, her mother stood in the empty front room and said, "I would do it again." And Nora said, "Would you?" And her mother said, "Ask me in a year." And neither of them ever brought it up again. Nora went to the sentencing for Elias Dracos in November. He got 9 years. He had told her 12. He stood up when they read it and did not react, and on his way out he found her in the 3rd row and stopped for exactly 2 seconds, and the marshal let him. "You did it with paper," he said. "Yes." 200 men in a street, in a box under a bed, and it was the box. He almost laughed. "Miss Beaumont, in 15 years I never once lost anything to a man with a gun." They moved him along. She sat back down. That night she went home and took out the cookie tin with the cardinal on it and opened folder 001 for the first time since the verdict, and sat on the floor of an apartment she was about to leave and read her father's file for what she assumed would be the last time. And that was when she saw the handwriting in the margin. Not hers, not Sam Delacroix's, not Thibodeau's. On the back of the photocopied first report of injury from July of 2014, in the bottom right corner in blue ballpoint, in a small, tight hand that was not any of the 3, somebody had written a single line and 2 initials. Nora turned the page over twice and her hands started to shake, because she had owned that photocopy for 11 years and had read the front of it perhaps 400 times and had never once turned it over. The line said, "The 3rd one this year. Same hook. Nobody will take it." RV Nora sat on the floor of an apartment she had 6 days left in and read 11 words over and over until they stopped being words. 3rd one this year, which meant that in July of 2014, before she had a certificate, before she had a textbook, before she had a ruler in her pocket, somebody else had already been counting. She called Vivian at 11 at night. "I need everybody who touched a first report of injury at Delta Crescent in 2014 with the initials R and V. Nora, the case is closed." "I am not asking about the case." There was a pause on the line long enough that Nora heard Vivian sit up in bed. "Say what you found." "Somebody wrote on the back of my father's report," Nora said, and her voice did something she hated. "Vivian, somebody was keeping account in 2014, and it was not Thibodeau, because I have his handwriting on 400 pages, and it is not his, and it was not the union, and it was not a lawyer, and whoever it was wrote, 'Nobody will take it,' which means they tried to give it to somebody, which means they walked into a room with it, which means there is a room somewhere in this parish where a person stood there holding this and got told no. Vivian was quiet. You want to know who said no, she said. I want to know who said no 11 years before anyone said yes. It took 9 weeks. Not because it was hard, because nobody kept records of the people who did not matter. Delta Crescent's personnel files from before 2016 had been migrated once and purged once, and the occupational health trailer had gone through 4 staffing contractors, and the one thing nobody archives is the name of the woman who sat at the desk. It was Ruben Ordonez who found her, which was correct, and which Nora would think about for the rest of her life. He called on a Thursday morning. Rosalind Vance, he said, RV. She ran the intake desk in the trailer on Terminal 4 from 2009 to 2015, licensed practical nurse. And Miss Beaumont, before you get excited, I got the name from a 79-year-old man in Violet who remembered her because she was the only person out there who ever wrote his name down right. Where is she? That is the part. Ordonez let out a breath. She is not on the license rolls. Not in Louisiana, not in Mississippi, not in Texas. I had a girl at the union office check all 3. Rosalind Vance stopped being a nurse in April of 2015 and never started again anywhere. Nora put her hand flat on the table. 9 months, and she said, and 9 months after my father. Yes, ma'am. Reuben, is she alive? She is alive, he said. She works at a Rouse's in Slidell. Nora drove to Slidell on a Saturday and stood in a grocery store for 40 minutes without going up to the customer service counter, which was the coward's 40 minutes, and she knew it while it was happening. And then a woman in her late 50s with reading glasses on a chain looked up and saw her, and something in the woman's face collapsed and reassembled in under a second. You are Wendell's girl, Rosalind Vance said. Nora could not speak. I've been watching the news for 6 months, the woman said. Her hands had gone to the edge of the counter and gripped it. Every night. And I told myself if she ever comes, I am not going to make her ask. They sat in a Waffle House on Gauze Boulevard for 3 hours, and Rosalind Vance did most of the talking. She had been 39 in 2014. She had a diploma from a 2-year program in Hammond and a husband on disability and 2 kids, and she had run the intake desk on Terminal 4, which meant she was the first person a hurt man saw and the last person who could still write down the truth before the form ate it. I started counting in 2012, she said. Not files. I did not have the sense to keep files. Just tick marks in the corner of the copy because the copy was the only piece of paper I was allowed to touch twice. Why did you stop being a nurse? Rosalind Vance stirred her coffee for a while. In February of 2015, I took what I had to the medical director, she said, to Dr. Thibodeau, and I put it on his desk and I said, Doctor, this is the 3rd hook injury this year, and there is no box on the form for it, and we have to make a box. And he looked at it for a long time, and then he said, Rosalind, if you leave that here, I have to do something with it, and if I do something with it, I lose the contract. And if I lose the contract, they bring in a doctor who does not even keep a book. So take it home. Nora's throat closed. He told you about the ledger. He told me he kept one in February of 2015. She looked up. So I went to the union, and the union man was decent, and he listened for an hour, and then he told me the truth, which was that a nurse's marginal note is not evidence, and that the men themselves would have to come forward and that they would not. And he was right, they would not, because they had children. And then I went to the state, and the state sent me a letter about jurisdiction. And then in April, HR called me in and said that the intake position was being restructured to a contractor model and thanked me for 6 years. They fired you. They restructured me, Rosalind said. Nobody ever fires you. That is the part nobody understands who has not been through it. Nobody ever does one single thing you can point at. And your license? I let it lapse. She said it evenly. Renewal came up in 2016, and it was $100 and something in continuing education hours. And I sat at my kitchen table with the form, and I thought, what exactly am I renewing? The right to sit at a desk and watch it happen and write it in the corner where nobody will read it. And I put the form in the trash, and I got a job at a Winn-Dixie, and I have not touched a wound in 10 years. Nora looked at a woman across a Formica table who had done everything right 11 years early with none of the tools alone and had been erased so cleanly that it took a federal trial and 9 weeks of searching to find her working a register 40 miles away. You wrote, nobody will take it, Nora said. Yes, I took it. Rosalind Vance's face broke completely. I know you did, she said. Baby, I have watched it on the news every night for 6 months and I have not been able to explain to my husband why I cry at a woman I never met. They sat there. I need to tell you something and I need you to not be kind about it, Nora said finally. I did not do it alone and I did not do it because I was braver. I did it because I had a certificate you could not afford and a body somebody let me look at and a mother who was willing to lose a house and a man with money who wired $6,000 at 2 in the morning. You had none of that. You had a ballpoint pen and a corner of a photocopy. And it was not enough. It was the only reason any of it worked, Nora said. Rosalind, and look at me. You are the reason I turned that page. 11 years and 400 readings, and I never once turned it over, and the day I did the whole thing changed because I found out I was not the first. And I need you to hear the actual sentence because I have been driving around with it for 9 weeks. You were not the person who failed. You were the person who started. Rosalind Vance put both hands over her face in a Waffle House. On a Saturday afternoon, the Delacroix Protocol got its name in a Union Hall on Poland Avenue 18 months after the verdict, and it got that name because Nora insisted and because Sam Delacroix's daughter cried when they told her. It was not a law. Nora had stopped believing in laws somewhere around the third continuance. It was a 2-hour training and a laminated card and a $19 kit. And by the end of the second year, there were 406 people carrying it on the lower Mississippi. She taught it herself twice a month in the back of that hall. She was not a nurse. She said that in the first 90 seconds of every single class because if she did not say it, somebody eventually would. I am not a nurse, she would say. I gave that up. So do not ask me if something is broken because I am not allowed to tell you and I will not. What I am going to teach you is how to make a piece of paper that nobody can hollow out. Then the ruler. Every photograph gets a scale in the frame. Every one. If there is no scale, it is a picture. If there is a scale, it is a measurement, and a measurement can be re-examined by a stranger in 4 years, and a picture cannot. She would hold it up 19 cents of plastic. This is the whole thing. This is the entire war. Then the mechanism. Do not write what he says happened. Write what you see and let the object explain itself. If the fingers all point the same way, write that the fingers all point the same way. Do not write crush. Crush is a conclusion and conclusions get argued. Direction is a fact and facts do not. Then the two copies. One goes where they can reach it, one does not. And I am going to be extremely clear about the second one because I gave up my license over the second one and I am not going to pretend otherwise in this room. The retention rules exist for real reasons and they protect real people. And if you keep a copy of a man's injury without his consent, you are taking something that belongs to him. So get his consent in writing, on the card, every time. I did not do that for 11 years, and it very nearly cost 47 families everything. And the only reason it did not is that I burned myself first, and I am telling you now so that you never have to. There was a man in the back row of the 9th class who did not take notes. Nora saw him on the way in and knew the shape of him before she placed the face, and it took her until the second break to put it together, and when she did, her stomach went cold. Perry Doucet, 26 years on Terminal 4, 58 years old. The man outside the Winn-Dixie and a rabbi. She let the class out at 9 and he stayed in the chair while everybody filed past him, and then it was the two of them. I'm not going to apologize to you, and he said. I did not ask you to. You closed my terminal. A jury closed your terminal, Nora said, but I am the one who started it, and I am not going to hide behind a jury, so yes, I did that. 311 of us. 311. Perry Doucet sat there turning his cap over in his hands, the exact way Ruben Ordonez had turned his in the street, and Nora understood suddenly that it was the same gesture, that it had always been the same gesture, that these men had one motion for grief and one for respect, and it was the same motion. My son is on the apron at Mobile now, he said. 23, started in March. Nora did not say anything. I am not here for you, he stood up. I am here because he is 23 and he does not know a hook from a hole in the ground, and there is nobody up there doing this. There will be. When? I do not know, she said. I am one person and I am doing 2 classes a month. Perry Doucet looked at her for a long moment. I did 26 years, he said. I know every man on that river, every single one. He put his cap on. I am not going to sit in your class again, and I am not going to say a nice thing about you to anybody. And if my wife asks, I am going to say I went to the hardware store. But you give me the cards, and I will get them to Mobile, and you and me are never going to be friends. Okay, Nora said. Okay, he said, and left. She sat in that empty hall for 20 minutes and then went out to her car and put her forehead on the steering wheel, and it was the closest thing to being forgiven she ever got, and she knew it, and she took it. She went to see Elias Drakos in year 3. Oakdale 4 hours up. Visitation on a Saturday, plastic chairs bolted to the floor, a vending machine that took quarters. He had aged more than 3 years worth. The ridge along his ribs was still there under the shirt, and he still moved a little to protect the left side, which she noticed in the first 4 seconds and hated herself for noticing. They did not embrace. They had never embraced, not once, in the entire history of the thing between them, and both of them seemed to understand that starting now would ruin something. You look well, he said. I look tired. You look like a woman with work, he almost smiled. Sit down, Miss Beaumont. I have 4 things, and I have been saving them for 11 months. 4. My cousin is in Beaumont, Texas, which I find funny, and nobody else does. He held up a finger. My company was sold in pieces, and I am not permitted to work in maritime again ever, which my attorney thinks is a tragedy, and which is the first genuine relief I have felt in 20 years. Second finger. Rosalind Vance wrote to me. Nora sat back. She what? She wrote to me in February. 4 pages. He said it carefully. She said she wanted me to know what my $820,000 a year bought in the trailer where she worked, and she described it in detail. And then she said she was not writing to make me feel worse, and that she hoped I would read it more than once. And I have read it perhaps 40 times. Nora looked at the table. And the 4th thing, Elias Drakos was quiet for a moment. I want the name, he said, of the man who put the hook in me. You never gave it to me. You know the name. It came out at trial. It was your cousin. No, he shook his head once. Costa held the hook. Somebody sent him to the berth that night, and it was not Costa's decision, and you knew that in the first week, and you never said it, and I have had 3 years in a room to work out why. Nora met his eyes. Say it then. Because if you had given it to me in the first week, he said, I would have killed him. And your case would have been a murder case, and every piece of paper you had would have been evidence in a homicide, and 11 years would have gone into a box with a number on it. His voice did not change at all. You did not withhold it to protect him. You withheld it because I was the only weapon in the room that could destroy your own case, and you took the weapon away from me before I knew I was holding it. The room was loud around them, families, children, a guard calling numbers. Yes, Nora said. Elias Drakos put his head back and laughed. It was the first time she had ever heard him do it without pain. And it went on for a while, and 2 tables over, a woman turned around and looked at them. 3 years, he said, wiping his eye. 3 years, and the thing that keeps me up is not the sentence. It is that a nurse from Bywater disarmed me in a parked car on Piety Street, and I said thank you. Do you want the name now? Yes. She gave it to him, a logistics manager, 44 years old, who had testified under immunity, whose name meant nothing to a jury and everything to the 4 men who had been on that berth. He was living in Georgia. He sold insurance. Elias Drakos listened and nodded and did absolutely nothing with it, and that was the point, and both of them knew it was the point. You waited until it was useless, he said. I waited until it could not cost anybody anything. That is the most brutal act of care anyone has ever performed on me, he said, and I want you to know I understand it as such. She stood up when the guard called it. Elias, yes. 6 years left. 6 years left. When you get out, Nora said, I am not going to be waiting. I know. I want to say the rest of it because you are going to think about this conversation for 6 years, and I am not leaving you with half a sentence. She put her hands on the back of the chair. There is a version of this story where the woman ends up with the dangerous man, and it is very satisfying, and it is the lie. And the lie is not that you are dangerous. The lie is that you saved me. You did not. You gave me a box of paper, and then you got out of the way, and getting out of the way is the only thing you ever did for me that was worth anything, and it is the thing I will always be grateful for. Elias Drakos stood with his hands at his sides. Then I will get out of the way for 6 more years, he said. It appears to be the one thing I am good at. She was almost at the door when he said her first name for the only time in either of their lives. Nora, she turned. 200 men came to your street, he said. I have thought about it every day for 3 years. I owned a company, 4 berths, 140 employees, and I could not have put 20 men on a street at 6 in the morning who were not being paid. He said it quietly. You wrote things down for 11 years and forgot about it, and it bought you 211. I want you to know that I have not recovered from that, and I do not expect to. Nora Beaumont drove 4 hours home and did not turn the radio on once. Her mother died in the spring of the 5th year in the one-bedroom in Chalmette of a stroke at 62, which it was too young and which Nora had known was coming for 8 months and had still not been ready for. In the last month, Colleen Beaumont talked about Wendell constantly. Not the death, the man. She talked about how he could not carry a tune, how he read the paperback to front, how he had once driven to Gulfport at midnight for a specific kind of praline she had mentioned in passing 4 days earlier. You never talked about him, Nora said one afternoon. I could not. For 11 years, Mama. I signed a piece of paper that said I would not discuss the circumstances of his death, her mother said, and after a while I could not find the line anymore between his death and him, and so I stopped saying all of it. That is what those papers do, Nora. They do not just take the thing, they take everything that touches the thing. She died on a Tuesday. At the funeral, Ruben Ordonez came and Rosalind Vance came, and Sam Delacroix's daughter came, and Toby Renard came with his wife, and the 2-year-old, who was now 7, and Perry Doucet did not come but sent flowers with no card, and Nora knew exactly who they were from because nobody else on earth would have sent flowers with no card. Vivienne Okafor stood next to her at the grave and said, Are you all right? And Nora said no, and Vivienne said, Good, do not be for a while, which was the most useful thing anybody said to her that month. She sold the last of it that summer. The one-bedroom leased, the storage unit, everything, except the tin. She kept the tin and she took it to the Union Hall and put it on a shelf in the back room where the training kits were stacked, and she opened it once a year on the anniversary and did not read anything. Just looked at it, 47 folders and a Polaroid and 11 words in blue ballpoint in the corner of a photocopy. The email came on an ordinary Tuesday in the 7th year. She almost did not open it. It came to the general address for the training program, which got about 40 a week, most of them asking about scheduling. My name is Adaize Nwosu. I am an emergency nurse at Providence Memorial in Mobile. I have a patient I am not supposed to have, and I do not know what to do. And somebody at the port gave me your name and said you would not tell me I was crazy. There was an attachment. Nora opened it and stopped breathing. It was a photograph of a wound along the lower ribs, 4 inches, curving, and at the deep end, a small hooked crescent beveled on the inferior margin, and lying beside it in the frame perfectly parallel, black gradations against white plastic, was a scale ruler. Nora Beaumont sat in the back room of the Union Hall on Poland Avenue and put both hands over her mouth. Then she picked up the phone. Adaize, this is Nora Beaumont. Her voice was steady, which she noticed with some distant surprise because nothing else about her was. You are not crazy. I want you to hear that first, and I want you to hear it from somebody who has been where you are. You are not crazy, and you are not the first. There is a chart, the woman said. It says he fell down the stairs at home. I know what it says. How do you know what it says? Because there are 11 boxes on their form, and none of them is another human being, Nora said. Listen to me, right now before anything else. Do you have a second copy of that photograph? A pause. Yes, Adaize Nwosu said. I always keep 2. Nora closed her eyes and felt 11 years and a license and a house and a mother and 211 men in a street at 6:14 in the morning all come down on one side of a scale at once. Then we are already ahead of where I was, she said. Get a pen. I'm going to tell you exactly what to write, and when you are done, that man will exist. She had gone into that hospital a nurse and come out of it, something else, and it had cost her everything the law could take, and a few things it could not, and she had never once been able to say it was worth it in a way that would satisfy a stranger. But there was a young woman in Mobile with a ruler in her hand and a second copy in her bag, and there was a laminated card in 406 pockets on the lower Mississippi, and there was a name on a training protocol that belonged to a 71-year-old crane operator whose body had told the truth when every piece of paper about him had lied. Nobody would ever be able to say those men had fallen downstairs at home. Nora Beaumont had made sure of it, and she had done it with a 19-cent ruler and 47 folders in a cookie tin, and no one ever again was going to be erased on that river without somebody writing it down.